It's really good to see you. Glad we got together like this, and glad to let you know about that program with Kevin tomorrow. He went into a lot of these things, but the issues you're concerned with are really significant. And welcome to the program, and welcome to you in the audience. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program again a guest who's been a guest in the past. That's Alice Slater, and she is the chair of Abolition New York, which is concerned with atomic weapons and so forth. And she's also director at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. So that sort of gives away her inclinations politically and ecologically and so forth. But Alice, it's so good to see you always, and welcome very much to Conversation.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Good to see you again. Go over with us a little bit, briefly, your bio again, because we've done it in the past, but people, that was some time ago, just briefly your bio.
Well, when my children were grown, I went to school and became a lawyer. And then working as a lawyer, I joined the Lawyers Alliance for Nuclear Arms Control as a volunteer while I was doing commercial litigation. And I learned more than any human being should have to know about nuclear weapons, and eventually left to work in the nonprofit area on peace and disarmament issues. And also, because of my work to eliminate nuclear weapons, I got interested in energy, because it's very apparent to me that you can't get rid of nuclear weapons if you're going to have metastasizing nuclear reactors all over the planet. I mean, we're seeing that now with Iran. What are we going to do about theirs? We talked about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, you know, because they had a nuclear civilian program. All these things. North Korea's nuclear weapons came out of civilian nuclear power. So that got me interested in energy as well.
Do you think it was Mr. Einstein to blame for coming up with the theory of relativity and showing the energy contained into that? We'd be better off if we hadn't gone down that Promethean path?
I think it's a challenge to us that we went down it, and how are we going to enter this new millennium and shift the paradigm, put the genie back in the bottle. It is possible. We have created many interesting networks. We had a whole group of engineer scientists, policymakers that drafted a model nuclear weapons convention. We know how to get rid of it, and we know how to dismantle the bomb, supervise it, verify it. I mean, the International Atomic Energy Agency has been superb in letting us know.
Did El-Baradei?
El-Baradei.
Yeah.
I mean, they told us, the earlier director, Blix, who was the head of the weapons inspection as well, they told us Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and they knew because they had done their nuclear inspection. You know, it might be hard to find a chemical or a biological weapon, but nuclear, you need huge infrastructure, reactors. It's not something you can hide in the basement.
Yeah. I wonder, you did law, and my dad was a lawyer and all that, but I'm wondering if we could put it in another perspective in a certain sense. So you and I were chatting just before we started the camera rolling that Lovelock is now in favor of atomic energy, peaceful atomic energy, a little confusing to you. But if we look at it, in a little wider sweep of history and so forth, it seems to me, you say put the genie back in the bottle. Can we not use gunpowder? We have clubs, we club each other over the head and steal the grain, and then we get a rifle, and then we get a musket, and then we get a Gatling gun, and then we get a dreadnought, and we get a tank, and we get, and finally we get hydrogen weaponry and chemical weaponry.
But, you know, this is...
And can we put history back in the bottle?
I think we have to...
You can, and if so, why now, since we haven't been able to do it in 200,000 years of Homo sapien existence, what is there now that makes something that has seemingly not been possible to stop the arms race, which has motivated most scientific research and funding of research and so forth throughout the whole of the human experience from Roman times on? What's different that makes peace possible in your estimation, whereas it seems not to have been able to be put back in the bottle throughout all of human history?
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Okay.
I like that question.
Good.
First of all, we've been living through an age of patriarchy. As a matter of fact, there's a very interesting book, The Goddesses versus the Alphabet, by Lawrence, I think his name is Shainling, but anyway, his hypothesis is that when the alphabet came in and we started to think sequentially and logically, that was the rise of the patriarchy, and the left brain took over and dominated, instead of a balance between the intuitive, nurturing, caring right brain that we all have and the logical, you know, aggressive left brain, that there's been an imbalance. As a matter of fact, in the Middle Ages, they killed about 6 to 9 million women, the healers, you know, the witches. So this feminine energy, or what I would call yin and yang, because it's not really men and women. It's yin and yang. It's
male
we
and
all
female
have both of it.
Yeah,
in us.
male and female principles
But we're
operative
in
the
an
universe.
imbalance now. And the thing that will shift now is that we, for the first time, have this self-referential capacity. For example, in 1969, we landed on the moon and saw the Earth as this beautiful spaceship Earth, the way Bucky calls it,
God
floating.
bless him,
So we saw that we're just interdependent and together. We're not really separated by huge oceans from other countries and tribes that we can fight with. We're one. We saw the oneness, and it's starting to imprint on our consciousness. We've had a rise of women's liberation and more a balance of nurturing energy. And I think that energy will restore the balance, that we're coming out of the ultimate of destruction. The 20th century, there were like 20 million people killed after World War I and 100 million at the end of the 20th century, most of them civilians, children, you know, women. So we have consciousness. We have growing consciousness. When we were clubbing each other or using the dreadnought, we didn't have a global consciousness of what this was doing to our whole planet. And we do now, and I think if we have a survival instinct, we'll act appropriately.
Well, that's an interesting take on it and everything. I'm not so sure. It was Marshall, that was the basis of Marshall McLuhan saying at least Western consciousness, and then we have the division East and West, male, female.
But look at how we're integrating with the East
That's
now.
true.
I mean, we've had all these Eastern religions coming over here, and meditation and forms of thinking, new
Yoga,
ways of thinking.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Robert Pirsig wrote this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Repair.
Great book.
It was wonderful, and he examined Western philosophy and compared it to Eastern philosophy, and his punchline was that Aristotle was an asshole.
That was his punchline?
Because Western philosophy cannot acknowledge paradox the way Eastern philosophy does. That Aristotle posited that a thing can either be or not be, and the Easterners said, not so fast. You know, we're not sure. There could be other ways of looking at things, and I think Westerners have a lot to learn from Eastern. You know, we have to integrate their thinking into ours.
Yeah, well, it would be seem to be called for. James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken, or we could say we are attempting to awaken. And so, I mean, that's something that he said. And he also said, or had Daedalus say, the West shall shake the East awake while you have the night for the morn. And you've got technology is largely concerned, and the view of the universe is different in the Western model. They seem to think consciousness comes out of material, whereas the East seems to assume consciousness and then materialism, material things coming out of that. But you still, if I may, you said because we've had feminism or something, that now things are different in this time, when there's a different consciousness that makes peace essential now in a way that it hasn't been, and it's not been there throughout history. I mean, a little more specific. What is there?
Well, look, we're so connected now. We're on the internet. We know when somebody dies in Darfur. I mean, it's in our, even if we're not acting appropriately, it's in our life every day, the death, the destruction. I mean, people are feeling it. People are getting motivated to take action. I mean, I don't know whether the action will be appropriate, but just look at this latest Obama campaign. All these tens of thousands of new voters, young people. There's a ferment. It's like we're coming into a new wave. Now, I don't know that Obama is going to be the new Messiah. I mean, he's done a lot of disappointing things to me.
They used to warn against the Black Messiah emerging when Martin King was talking his stuff, you know.
Well, Martin Luther King created a great deal of consciousness.
It sure did, yeah, right.
I mean, and I
the
think,
racism that was endemic then to the whole of the world. And
but
so
this will be wonderful. I mean, the fact that if we elect a black president, even if it's Clarence Thomas, you know, I mean, just being black doesn't make you good. Just like just being a woman doesn't mean you're a person of peace.
Well,
I mean, Margaret Thatcher and Madeline Half-Bride, I call her, because she talked about the Iraqi sanctions in the first Gulf War had caused 500,000 children to die, Iraqi children. And she said, well, that's the price of, you know, our power.
Yeah,
very
to
callous.
Leslie Stahl. Yeah.
And that's a woman. So it's not men and women. I really want to be clear about that, especially my son gets very angry.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But anyway, it is a kind of new consciousness, a right brain, more nurturing, intuitive style. And this interesting, when you're talking about quotes, there's this Japanese-American writer, Hakutani, I think he's a novelist, and he wrote this book, What the Scarecrow Wants.
Okay.
And he wrote that he was trying to explain a situation, and he said the Japanese have a word. There's no word for it in English, ritsupoi. And it means when your logic has carried you so far into a corner that you can't really see the truth, where it overextends, where just to be logical you deny something. And there's actually that word in Japanese that we don't have a word to describe that.
Not uncertainty. No, it's not the uncertainty principle of physics.
Paradox.
Yeah,
it's going back that there could be two truths, like the logic is taking you down one path, and then there's like a right brain truth that says, no, that's, you know, that's not going to work. But that we can't acknowledge it in Western culture.
There's been that division between our spiritual leaders and our wisdom leaders, Jesus, Buddha, that kind of stuff, who've been saying, Lao Tzu, who've been saying these kind of things throughout the 200,000-year span of human history, and it's been roundly ignored by our political leaders.
But more people are paying attention now.
Do you think so? To our spiritual leaders?
No, but more people are becoming spiritual.
The news that we see is all on the political process, and the political process is not, you know, actually tuning into things spiritual. In fact, it's been hijacked by a lot of fundamentalist people, either of a Christian or what other thing. So the spiritual traditions are that nurturing thing which has been ignored in the geopolitical realpolitik, still seems in the saddle as I look out in the world.
But you can't look at our mass media and say that reflects what's happening, because it's owned by the corporations that own the military. They did not look at the Democratic debates. Dennis Kucinich, who was the only one for single-pay and not-for-profit health care, who has a bill in for nuclear abolition, who's talking about a Department of Peace, they didn't let him into the debates. I mean, you actually couldn't hear that level of opinion, and I'm just finding out now in our own New York State, if you want to get on the ballot to run for president in New York State, if you're a Democrat or Republican, you only need 5,000 signatures. And if you're anybody else, like Ralph Nader or Cynthia McKinney or any of the Green Party, they need 15,000 signatures. How could we be so unfair so that the debate is always narrowed between the Republicrats, which I call the Republicrats, the Republicans and the Democrats. The media is owned by the corporations. NBC is GE and, you know, all these military contractors. Americans are getting weapons of mass distraction through the media.
Thank you, Danny Schechter. Wrote a real good DVD about that. He's great. He's really good. Yeah. But I mean, back when we were chatting before we started, and we want to get on to some of the things, but we were chatting before, and you've been looking at these things well, and you've written a great paper that's gotten linked by a whole lot of very important sites on the atomic question or the atomic energy question and that sort of thing. Really beautifully written. I read it, rather long, very well documented, and I congratulate you on that paper. And it's really getting around. And
I wanted to get to Obama.
I know you do. Well, okay, yeah, you would. And then he has to get elected in the face of a lot of things. It's not at all certain. There's some, but anyway, but we were talking about how the weapon systems that exist now, even in our lifetime, Alice, we can still remember the Second World War, and we were, in a certain sense, as a species, protected in our impotence to destroy one another. We had limitations on what the weapon systems would allow. We tried. We tried hard. We firebombed Dresden. We ginned up all the hatred and so forth, but we were impotent in terms of, in a qualitative new way, seems to be the case now, to where the weapon systems that exist, not inflection points of possible theories of whatever, but actual weapon systems that exist, some of them on a higher trigger alert, and also germ weaponry, other weapons out of space, you know, domination of space and so forth, where the geopolitical, that if they were to be unleashed in the spasm of hatred, it would, modeling tells us that it would, there would not be, and I'm not sure whether you cotton on, as they say, that may or may not be true, but I'd answer no, that if it was unleashed, like I mentioned to you, Ted Turner, in a very cogent interview with Charlie Rose, said that we can destroy the entire human species in about 30 minutes.
Well, he's
now,
right.
do you think that the weapon systems that exist now are species lethal, whereas within our lifetime we were protected from that? We could kill the tribe in the other village, cower them and that sort of thing, win out? Or is that a new existential reality that exists and has come into being in terms of the ontology, for want of a better word, within your and my lifetime?
Absolutely.
You think it is? Absolutely.
The nuclear weapon gave us the capacity. We had studies on nuclear winter back in the 60s and the 70s,
Carl Sagan.
which is why we started doing these drastic arms reductions. We went from 70,000 nuclear weapons on the planet
26.
Now we're at 26,000.
Yeah,
25,000 are in the U.S. and Russia. The other 1,000 are in England, France, China,
Israel,
India, Pakistan, and North Korea. So we're talking about 9 countries.
Yeah, those.
So it's doable. We know how to.
What is doable?
Getting rid of them, and that's what my paper is about.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is
the
about.
point of my paper is that even Kissinger and Henry Schultz, these rusty Cold Warriors, are now saying we should be getting rid of nuclear weapons because they're too dangerous, and the longer we hold on to them, the more countries are going to try to get them. And I think they only go halfway because they say, let's get rid of nuclear weapons. I agree with that. But if you keep spreading nuclear power plants around the world, and they're saying, we'll control it, just a few of us will have it. We'll give you the technology. Then you're setting up another discriminatory regime of haves and have-nots. Having the technology for a nuclear power plant gives you the bomb. I call them bomb factories because the hardest thing to make a nuclear weapon is to get the radioactive material. And once you're doing the reactor, you're doing it. Well, the enrichment, you take the rod that comes out of the end of the nuclear reactor and you put it through again so that it makes it hotter and hotter. But to get that initial fuel cycle to enrich, you need a civilian nuclear reactor. So these guys who are operating out of the 20th century patriarchal paradigm of centralized, authoritative, hierarchical control, you know, the father figure is going to take care of everything. They think they're going to control the fuel cycle. There's all kinds of proposals now from the International Atomic Energy Agency. Bush has his global nuclear energy project that we'll reprocess, we'll ship it all over the world, we'll bring it back, but nobody can hold on to it. Well, I think that's a fantasy because there's nothing to stop a North Korea or a Libya or an Iran at some point to say, out of here and hold on to it, just like they did before. If they decide they want to weaponize the materials, which once they've got that reactor, they can.
Whereas
and listen to this, as a result of our saying we were going to do this, 6 new Middle East countries said they're going to get nuclear power plants. Saudi Arabia, Syria, Algeria, United Arab Emirates, Morocco. I mean, this is insane.
It's okay for the United States to have it because we're good, or for Israel, say. That's probably the most dangerous place in the world.
I think we're the most dangerous place.
Well, yeah, but in terms of, one wonders how would something like that be done? People would say, well, it's unreasonable, mad. Remember we had mutual assured destruction and everything. And it wouldn't happen in terms of a strategic thing. It would happen accidentally in an unleashing of deep-seated fear and anger and hatred out of conflicting narratives and so forth. So it happens somewhere. But it's okay for us to have them. We can intimidate the world, and we do, but they can't have it. That's the sort of thing like Gandhi said, well, it's okay, you guys are all on the streetcar, and we want to get on the colonial powers. It was colonialism. It's a white man's colonial burden attitude toward the lesser people of the world, projection of that psychology built into the context, because we are building weapons. Our research is devoted to building new weapons, not only hydrogen weapons, chemical weapons, wave weapons, Tesla. And it's all
about Star Wars.
And Star Wars, that's what I meant, Tesla. You have wave weapons and things that are being developed. And that cycle of developing and the leading edge of that, the leading edge rationale for funding research and human input and intellectual is war. It's still war.
And I don't know if you're aware of this. This, to me, is shocking.
Well, it is, though. That is the case. Huh?
This year, in the United Nations, as we've every year, for the last 5 years, Russia and China put in a resolution asking that there be a ban on weapons in space. And every country in the world votes for it except the United States of America, and Israel abstains. And this last year,
well, those are the good guys.
This year, Russia and China put in a draft treaty. And every country in the world said, yes, let's sit down and look at it and talk about it, except the United States. We voted no.
That's because
this is being driven by what Eisenhower talked about as the military-industrial complex, without being trite.
Yeah, I know.
And I looked at that speech. He also talked, which they never quote, about the scientific, intellectual elite.
Yes.
That we have to beware of that as well as the military-industrial complex.
They're part of it.
And our Congress is bought. They get huge campaign donations. They can't get elected without this military-industrial complex.
Right.
And so America is in this tough spot right now.
Yeah. America's in a tough spot, and America and her allies, the closer you're allied to America, the more you're associated with the major threat to the continuation of the species. We want to have the threat is over there. If they get, the British didn't want the Indians to get the Gatling gun.
I know, but there's no over there anymore. That's the whole point.
There
that we're
is
all
in the minds of a lot of people.
I don't think so.
You think Mr. McCain has a chance to be winning on the patriotism ticket?
No, I think he's old.
You do? You think?
I really do.
I just see.
I just hope that the peace movement sticks with Obama because he's becoming so martial, you know, that we might all walk.
But this other question, this existential question, right, of the fact that that resonates with you as being a true fact, that if there was, let's just say, a dirty bomb set off in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and they got 120 targeted missiles, apparently, with nuclear warheads, and that's it, we can't stand that, it goes, then Pakistan, and then there goes, and then and that would set it off. And it could be set off by somebody doing something very... accidentally, perhaps. But the point is that if it is, and the weapons full-tilt boogie, like we were doing as recently as the Second World War, it would apparently...
Destroy the species.
No, the species.
Yes.
There wouldn't be a single survivor.
And animals, too, not just
Well,
humans.
a lot of the animal kingdom, I don't know whether they can
destroy... Maybe the cockroaches would survive like they say they do. I don't know. But there have been many studies that show that that would happen.
Yeah, well, that's the point exactly. You've done a lot of research into this area and so forth.
Yeah.
And where are the best ones that the models and the information behind the models and how they model it? What are the assumptions? Where are the best ones? And what do they show on that question? Do we live now in an age where with the weapons that exist, that if they were unleashed, as they have been with regularity throughout the whole of 200,000 years of our existence, it would be the end of the hominoid line?
I can't quote them to you, but I'll tell you, if you just go to Google, put in nuclear weapons, destroy the Earth, nuclear winter, all the studies will come up, and they're at very fine institutions. You know, the best scientists have worked on it. They're not some guy in a diner.
Yeah, right.
They're experts that have modeled these things and worked it out. I think I haven't memorized it because I knew about it, and I said, this can't happen, and I just had to work against this and the
Right,
opportunity.
right.
See, you're talking about everything that's always happened in history, but
Right.
we never had this.
History is a nightmare.
But we never had this.
That's what I'm trying to
So that's
exactly
an
make.
opportunity.
No, but what
because it's a wake-up call. It can tell us, hey, guys, we got to change our ways. We have to move to a more peaceful, balanced
like we've never
universe like we've never done before, because we never had the capacity to destroy ourselves.
Thank you. That's exactly the point I'm trying to make on the negative side, the yin and the yang and so
but
forth.
that could be a positive.
Okay, but now what I'm trying to say, if I could, and I appreciate it, that's one side of the dialectic, let's say, is something. We've got this which is new. We should put that up front. That should be right up front. We should understand that's the case. That's the
for
case.
the first time.
And it's there, and it's new. It's existentially new. What on the positive side is existentially significant that makes for the first time peace possible where peace has never been there? What has changed on the yin-yang, the balance, that makes this time different than history? And what is the paradigm shift on that side of our and it's all measuring capability. It's not what we're, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, no, because there's, aside from this new fact that we can destroy the species with our wars, we can destroy the species with our abuse of agriculture, with our abuse of fossil fuel, in other words, we're now at the limits of the industrial era. We've had 500 years of, the corporation that was formed with the Dutch West India Company. That was the first time they had limited liability, where you could go and rape and pillage and plunder, and nobody held you accountable. Which
LLC.
This is what we have now.
Yes,
So now, for the first time, it's not just the nuclear weapons, which are the most dramatic. It's the environment, it's the chemicals in the environment, and what we have on the positive side is our new understanding that we have enough energy from the sun, from the wind, from the tides, from marine energy to provide all of our needs on the planet today.
Okay, now
and
you're
also,
getting towards
when the
something,
sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, we have the hydrogen fuel cell, which is like a magic bullet. It stores the sun and the wind as energy. And when you put it in your car or your airplane or your train and it burns, the hydrogen recombines with oxygen to make water vapor, pure enough to drink. So we have this miracle solution. And there are forces in the world that are stopping it. The oil companies and the coal companies and the nuclear industries and the corporations, and now they're going nuts for ethanol. Why is ethanol so big? And there's been food riots in 25 countries. And we're putting food in our gas tanks while people are starving. Why is ethanol big? Because they can sell the corn. They cannot sell the sun. They cannot sell the wind. They cannot sell the tides. There's money to be made in jobs, in doing the infrastructure, the solar panels, the hydrogen fuel cell, but it's not a cash cow where they can keep selling it over and over again. It's free. You could, if we gave it to Africa, imagine all those poor people could get their sun for free if they had the cells and the structure to harness it. We could end poverty on the planet. We have the abundance of all these
Now you're
free
using
energies.
words I really like to hear. Because if you look at the discipline of economics that informs the political process, it's always been, one definition is it's the allocation of scarce resources. We've always lived in a condition of scarcity. So my suggestion about what is equally significant to the, to the reality is that in a certain sense, and it's one that it never comes up anywhere, that we have transcended, and that's capability. Destructive capability can be modeled. And on the other side, what would be equally significant in a paradigm sense is that, and I don't know whether it makes sense or it can't even be, it's just dismissed ipso facto absurd, we have transcended in terms of a system, 6 billion heading for 10, technology, new materials, we have transcended in capability the ironclad laws of scarcity that we now have. We have transcended scarcity in a material sense for the whole system, And that's never mentioned by anyone in a particular pattern as being relevant to our reality institutions like politics and so forth, or economics.
Well, I mention it, and it's on the cover of our energy report, A Sustainable Energy Future is Possible Now. We have a picture of an angel blowing on a light bulb.
Well, let's see if we can. We got one little image we want to bring up, and it's one that brings some hope into this dialogue. Right. It's all a lot of dark. But let's see, could you try and push that and bring up that picture? And it's a picture of a goddess blowing on a light. An angel glowing. There it is. There it is. Now, what is that? Talk to that, Alice.
Well, this is a report with 188 footnotes, citing studies to show that we have enough wind, solar, marine energy, and geothermal. These are the clean energy sources from our Mother Earth to meet every one of our energy needs and help avoid any carbon footprint, no carbon footprint, and as I said, with the hydrogen fuel cell as the backup plan, which can store the energy of these things, like Iceland is going to be completely carbon-free, energy sufficient by 2050 by using geothermal and marine energy and hydrogen fuel cells.
Okay,
now,
that's good. Yeah,
you're not hearing about this.
Yeah,
as we said, because it will put a knife through the heart of the energy industry. I mean, like this T. Boone Pickens has been talking, the Texas millionaire, about how he's going to harness the wind and shift all the transportation to natural gas. Well, that's a carbon source of transportation.
Natural gas is clean, though, isn't it?
It's cleaner. But we could switch everything to sun and wind and hydrogen fuel cells that you take the sun, you run it, you heat up water, it creates hydrolysis, it divides into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen goes in a fuel cell. When it combusts, it recombines with oxygen into pure water vapor, no carbon, not 1 ounce of carbon. Gas has carbon. It's better than oil and coal, but why do that? Why not go? Because you can't sell the sun.
Okay.
You can sell natural gas.
Right.
He owns natural gas fields. I was just reading this in the Indie magazine, so he's got an agenda.
Yeah.
But you know, the point is, it's all here for us, the abundance, to go from the paradigm of scarcity to abundance. I have a quote that I always put in my email from Buckminster Fuller, that every Earthian has the ability to live on this planet like a billionaire, at a billionaire standard, relying on the only safe nuclear reactor on the planet, our sun, 93 million miles away.
Conveniently parked.
Right.
Yes, right.
That we're not dealing, I mean, anybody that's talking about nuclear power, I think they're only doing half a deck. Because even if it weren't more expensive and you weren't losing out by putting your precious energy dollars into this very expensive technology, when, as Amory Lovins points out, if for every dollar you put in nuclear, if you put it into solar or wind, you would get much more energy for the dollar, or efficiency. But even, let's say it was even, which it isn't. Nobody is talking about the cancer, the leukemia, the birth defects. Every nuclear power plant, every community has higher levels of sick children. You know, it's in the water, it's in the air, it's in the soil. It's a very unhealthy kind of an energy, even if it wasn't like not helping global warming. So I don't know where some of these, I know James Moore, who keeps saying he was with Greenpeace, he's getting paid by the industry. I don't know what Lovelock's bias is, but
why, if I may, why haven't we done, we have done that. They've got the polders in Netherlands, they got windmill. We used to have a windmill on every farm.
Right.
And we had the tapping of that kind of thing. Why haven't we done that if it's so easy?
Well,
why haven't we done that all throughout history and gotten really good clean sources like now is available? What's changed? New technology?
Yeah,
making
I think
it
we
possible?
didn't know. It wasn't possible before. We didn't know about hydrogen fuel cells. We didn't know how to store the sun. Oil was like a miracle, you know. It was we got rid of whale oil. We were depending on whale oil.
Yeah, that's the way you used to.
And then we went to regular oil and coal, and that was like people didn't know. But now we know. I mean, it's the same thing as with war. Now we know about coal and oil. We can't rely on it. We know about uranium too. Even if you were to do this whole nuclear industry, we'd run out of uranium in 50 years. So here you'd have all these bomb factories all over the planet. You know, you'd have to, and it's just, it's an insane
Well, how are we going?
direction.
Yeah, but if I may, the idea that we've transcended scarcity,
Right.
that there's enough, not even enough. I think in your little thing you showed, I think it was abundance. There's a difference between abundance and enough. I mean,
We have
like Karl
abundance.
Marx used to say, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And the plutocrats who ran the world always felt, well, the only, even totally state-owned, no private sector, no bad guys in the private sector, decided that all that people needed was a half a bowl of gruel. They could get by on that. And they're saying that to people now. It's all your fault because you have a light bulb that's 50 watts, and if you learn to cut back to a 30-watt light bulb, and it's all your fault, people, because you're just profligate and everything. They're not saying there is abundance. You have a 200-watt light bulb, not a 100.
But
they're putting the blame on the people,
That
you know?
study
I mean, this is the liberals. They're putting the blame on the people. We're flawed, this and that kind of stuff. And on the idea of abundance for all never comes up as something. They say that's ipso facto absurd. There can't nearly be enough.
Well,
and Jesus said the poor will always be with us. Those people over there, they happen not to have a white color skin. They're always going to be with us. They're going to be that. That's the projection of the political.
Century thinking.
Yeah, but that's the projection of the world.
But,
The way it
no,
is
but
now.
we have to project our own image. I mean, we have power in our own image. We have the internet.
Yeah.
This is crumbling. I mean, when you got Kissinger saying we got to get rid of nuclear weapons, along with Schultz and Sam Nunn and Perry, you know, it's crumbling, this old paradigm.
You think
we
so?
have to come
Even
forward
as they-
with all our positive solutions that are like that study. I mean, when you read it, it's incontrovertible. There's no reason why we can't do it, but they're not going to put that on NBC because that's owned by GE and they have an investment in nuclear power. They don't want you to know it.
So how are we going to relate to the
shows
people who
like
have
this.
the people who have the power? We're all like serfs on a feudal
We
estate.
got to take back the power.
Well, we never had it. I mean, I don't think that the
I don't
serfs.
agree.
Well, I don't think in Rome that the people counted for anything. You had the emperors. Then you had the kings in the dynastic states, and people got there. Now you got the investment banker and the plutocrats.
Yeah, but you know, we have...
And we don't have a vision of how to set up the geopolitical arrangement or the economic
we do.
arrangement.
Democracy, we should try it someday.
Oh, that's a good idea. Somebody
We've
said
had
that.
a very imperfect version of it, starting in Greece when only the plutocrats had the vote, right?
If
just
Athens,
the man, right?
In Athens, in Periclean Greece, Aristotle said there were a few that lived the life of the mind and the spirit, and it had to be and it was based on slavery.
But look at
You
our
had slavery.
Constitution.
But let me finish,
Yeah.
if I could, because he said that it would be the people had to make those cloths that they could luxuriate on and so forth. So you had to have slaves to do it. And he said it would necessarily be that there would always be slaves. That's essentially
Well,
what.
obviously he
wait
was
a minute.
wrong.
He said until or unless the loom learned to weave. Now, if the loom learned to weave, and if all through history, just think for a minute the transformation you're trying to talk about. All of our institutions, the basic assumptions of our institutions, the educational system, all of the institutions, including notions of human nature, were all formulated within a certain condition that has been fundamentally transformed. It's not just energy.
Right.
It's the whole structure of human society has to be transformed. It's much larger if it's true that you're transcending scarcity, not just energy, the whole of the framework. It's much larger than going from a geocentric to a heliocentric view with Copernicus and Galileo, and it played hell on consciousness. We do not have Obama, all he's going to do is just keep the thing in order where you're going to have all the wage slaves and the assets are all going to be owned by a tiny group that's going to set the template for everybody. Nobody gets tenure unless they fit into their template and all of that. And we don't have
plan.
We don't have any
That's
vision.
their plan.
Now, I'm talking, if I may, Alice, the progressives don't have anything.
I have something.
Okay, well, okay. Well, I'm suggesting that.
Yeah, it's not out there. I agree with you, but that's why this program is important. That's why we have to get our information out and give people inspiration. I mean, a guy like Dennis Kucinich, he gets it. He's in another paradigm.
Yeah.
He was running for president. They shut him up.
Yeah.
Ralph Nader gets it.
Yeah.
They don't let him talk.
Well,
but I want to talk about this slavery and Aristotle, because think of our Constitution.
Yeah.
It came out of the Enlightenment,
yeah.
right? And here were these 18th century patriarchal landed gentry that wrote the Constitution. So, of course,
they were mostly
it was
Scots.
very flawed. I mean, even though they had all these wonderful ideas about democracy, they also said a slave was 3/7 of a person.
3/5.
Or what, and women didn't have the vote.
Yeah, right. Everything's been screwed up since we gave them the vote. Maybe we should take the vote away from the women.
No, everything's getting better. But the thing is that as consciousness rises, we had, in America, we got rid of legal segregation. We gave women the vote. Now, we had women's liberation in the 60s. We got rid of apartheid in South Africa. The wall came down in Berlin. There has been a rising democratic force
coming out of America.
Coming up, and out of the French Revolution. I don't think we could take credit for the whole thing.
No, you don't. No, but we do.
Well,
we're trying to build.
We were like leading the
but we still are projecting wage slavery.
I understand.
As an understanding.
That's
but they don't
hypocrisy. That's where we. Now it's, in a way, it's sort of an opportunity because it's so apparent that we're not living up to what we say our ideals are with torture and lying and spying and murder. I was at a bar association meeting where this ambassador from Malaysia came and said, you know, America was always considered the gold standard on human rights, even though we knew, like in places like Nicaragua, or, you know, or we overthrew Mossadegh in 1953.
And that was 53, 54.
Right.
Yeah,
but,
and our Benz.
But we talked the right game. Now we're not even talking that game. You know, but other people are picking it up.
Now
it's out there.
Where is the model that is relevant to the geopolitical structuring of this planet Earth?
I think what we're seeing in Latin America is like a grassroots.
Chavez?
Yeah, Chavez. Not
Evo
that he's
Morales.
perfect. Morales, Silva. I think in Europe they take it very seriously.
Europe seems to be more of a
Europe
serious
takes democracy more seriously than
real
we
democracy, including economic democracy.
Right, because they had such death and destruction and war. America, we're like naive. You know,
it's true.
Nothing really happened to us.
Right.
We haven't suffered the way other countries have.
Right.
So I don't think that there's. I very strongly believe that we haven't had the kind of democracy that we need to have these fair and just decisions and to sprinkle the abundance all over and not have big corporations sitting on it. I mean, at the turn of the century, Teddy Roosevelt came in and did a whole bunch of reforms, trust busting.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
You know,
conservation
and
also.
This is going to come now. We're going to have to rein those guys in and maybe get rid of corporate immunity. I don't think there's anything wrong with entrepreneurial capitalism when I think about it, you know, but to have limited liability and not to be responsible completely for your actions, I think that's an invitation to pollute, to harm people, to injure the environment, to not care about the future, you know, just, it's an invitation. You're not liable.
Yeah, well, you have no responsibility to
so
the...
you pay a fine.
You only have responsibility to the share owners and getting a better, quarter profit gain, and that's their responsibility, and that's what they're doing. So you wouldn't expect them...
Right.
You wouldn't expect them to come up with some sort of a paradigm that they are so well served by, and then they also have certain visions of what human... They say you're trying to do something against human nature. Human nature is inherently greedy, acquisitive, and wants more all the time. But they take that view as that's the way human nature is. Maybe that's the way they are. And they got there, and they win. And the winners win. Do you notice?
But democracy, more democracy will solve that problem. Like right now, they're going to be regulated again because of these subprime mortgages. They're going to dream up some kind of regulation for them. There's going to be some kind of discussion about whether we bail them out including their shareholders. I mean, we don't want the whole system to collapse so quickly.
Okay.
But are we going to make the shareholders whole? I mean, why can't they take a bath?
Who do we repair to out of the canon, if that's the term, of economic theory for informing the political and the sociological evolutionary development of the planet?
Well, you have to look at the ecological economics, like Herman Daly and Fay Duchin, because I find that the classical economics are like they're only dealing with half a deck. They're not using the right side of their brain. They have something they call externalities. So when they're figuring costs, they don't figure the cost of pollution or the cost of human health or the cost of losing the infrastructure of the earth, you know, the sustainability of the earth. None of that is figured in their cost.
Hazel Henderson's good.
Hazel Henderson's
She's
wonderful.
Great. Yeah, she is. I agree with you.
And so economics has to change, because that's also right now very left brain. They don't take in the gestalt. They're looking at things in this narrow, logical way of what things cost. And I saw once an example of like GDP, gross domestic product, which is like a measurement. Well, everything goes in there, the cost of a divorce, of cancer, of an automobile, whatever you pay for. I mean, that's not a quality of life index. There are some costs that should be subtracted, you know.
But, I mean, we've had a traditional what about the progressive? People call themselves progressives, and the progressive community, you wouldn't expect the answers to come out of the plutocrats. I mean, you have a plutocratic situation in every political system around the world where the assets and the real wealth is owned by a tiny group. It's becoming more concentrated. Work input or labor input to production is less and less on a percentage basis through time with the advancement of technology. Lord Keynes said there's going to be massive technologically induced unemployment coming out of really good working systems. You're not going to need people on an assembly line when Mr. Ford did. And yet we distribute all income to everybody, and it seems to be generally accepted that the way for somebody, a normal citizen in any political entity, to gain income is to have what they call a job. We're going to get full employment. Mr. Obama says we got to get employment up. We're going to get everybody employed, but we're going to allow the assets that is producing the wealth increasingly to be owned by a tiny group like serfs on a feudal estate, and the template for the whole society, world and national, is set by a few people who own all the assets, and the progressive community seems to think that's perfectly all right.
No, I don't think so, and I think
what
that's bursting apart right now. I mean, all these people are losing their homes. They're waking up from the big casino. They had that 24/7 ticker going with the stock market all the time. And about 10 years ago, the market took a big dip, and all the institutional investors were getting out, the banks and the insurance company. It came back up, and the Daily News had a headline, "The little guy saves the market." And I said, boy, are we in trouble. I mean, everybody's in the big casino. They've been brainwashed to be in it. There's never been so many people gambling in the market. And now the market is crashing, and the middle class is going to wake up, and they're hurting. They can't live with their gas prices. Their homes are being lost. And so it's a readjustment. We've been in a dream world.
How do we deal with that?
We deal with it by coming up with good proposals, like tax. When Eisenhower was president, there was a 90% tax bracket. You know, all of a sudden, and since Reagan and Clinton, and that's why I call them Republicrats, because Clinton just did exactly what Reagan did. We've cut taxes on the wealthy, and the income has been redistributed upwards. Very unequal income in America compared to
Europe.
Compared to how we used to be.
Yeah, okay, I see, history,
Forget about Europe, just us. What we were reasonably entitled. When I went to Queens College in 1954 as a New Yorker, it was free education. It was $5 a semester.
Yeah, I know, I remember.
And now City College is $4,000 a year. I mean, so these kids come out of school, they're in debt, high interest debt.
40,000, 50,000.
You know, I mean, that's the free college. There is no free college. Kids don't even believe me when I tell them that. Why did we let this happen? You know, like, well, the corporations bought the Congress. They paid everybody off, and nobody votes for the people.
So what's the solution if we've got a situation like that we've inherited? What's the solution in realistic terms?
Well, unfortunately,
do you
the
think?
solution is that people are going to have pain, and then they're going to demand different things of their senators and even Obama. I don't have much hope for Obama.
You mean it being
You know,
a radical force, you mean?
Yeah, like even progressive, as you say.
Well,
there
that's
is
what
no
I'm trying
progressive.
to get at. The progressives don't seem to have. What is the? If you
There
you
is
got,
no
you
progressive.
got Naomi Klein writing a really
no,
interesting
she's
book
good.
against the
Well,
against
she's
the
good.
Chicago boys and that. So that's a critique of you know, that particular thing, or Schumpeter or whatever. I don't know. They still cling to Marx, Karl Marx, as
No,
an
I don't
interpreter
think
of.
so.
Where is the ideological pinnings for the progressive community that is going to be able to bring a realistic challenge to the way things are, in a way that will also involve those who are in the systems by which power is operated on this planet and influence?
I think it's going to be pragmatic progressivism, like
Okay.
a guy like Nader. He
Nader,
gets
yeah.
it. I mean, just listen, I don't know what his philosophy is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be communism. I think communism was too much the other way. I think you need an entrepreneurial spirit.
You do.
Right, and look,
Schumpeter.
capitalism we see has nothing to do with democracy, because China now is a prime example
Yeah,
of capitalism.
no, it's
right?
communism.
No, but it's capitalism.
Yeah, but they say we're communists.
They always
I watched him, Mr. Who. He's talking to all these people to say, we are socialists.
They always collapse.
And so the left, or the progressives, are based on socialistic view and the labor theory of value and the idea of how important human beings are and so forth. But the reality is that all the assets are owned by a few people, and the assets are increasingly responsible,
Right.
and we're heading for massive
And the
unemployment.
reality is that we tell ourselves we're a democracy, and we're not.
We're not.
The elections were fixed. We can't even get a paper ballot this time around.
Yeah,
I mean, you
right,
know,
yeah, electronic
even this
ballot.
time around, we're
Yeah.
still fighting for
Yeah,
this.
right.
In New York State, you should see what we went through to
Yeah.
get these
Yeah.
optical scan machines
Yeah.
instead of the computers without records. And when we finally got them now, we don't have an audit on the optical scans, so we
Yeah.
still don't know. Right here in New York, New Yorkers that aren't going to let them sell you the Brooklyn Bridge, right?
Yeah, right.
We're letting
Right.
them, you
Yeah.
know. So this has to get out. The news has to get out. But this, as far as I'm concerned, with nuclear disarmament, going back to that's like one piece of the problem, a big piece.
Yeah, right. Okay.
This is a tremendous opportunity because, as I said, Kissinger's saying we got to get rid of it.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Obama says he's
Sign of the
committed,
time.
but I'm telling everybody, and I want to tell Obama, that if we think we're going to get rid of nuclear weapons and spread nuclear power plants around the world and dominate the heavens like we're doing with Star Wars and missile defense.
Full spectrum dominance. That's all we
right.
want. Full spectrum dominance of Earth and heaven.
And actually, in the U.S. Air Force documents under Clinton, it said, dominating and protecting the military use of space to protect U.S. interests and investments. That's what the Air Force said.
That's
They
their
weren't
charge.
even ashamed to say it. You know, like they weren't hiding. But it's like a triple play.
Yeah.
It's not only the nuclear weapons.
Right, thank
that's easy.
Yeah.
Because Russia has always wanted to cut.
Yeah.
We rejected it. And then when we pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty, then Putin said, forget it, we're not going to talk to you.
That's right, that's right.
And now we're trying to plant missiles in Czechoslovakia right under the guy's nose, you know, I mean, the missile base there. So they're not going to talk about nuclear disarmament if we keep putting our missiles and our space hardware there. Nobody's going to talk about it. Everybody's going to want their own nuclear weapon to threaten the U.S. because look how well it's working with North Korea,
That's
with
right.
Iran. That's why if we're going to get rid of the nuclear weapons, which is the easy part, we have to promise no missiles, we have a missile ban, no space weapons, and we will have willing partners with Russia and China on this. And if you have the U.S. and Russia and China agreeing, then everybody comes along, including Israel and Iran and North Korea. If everybody agrees, there's going to be no nuclear weapons, no nuclear power, and no space domination, then we're shifting the paradigm. But if you think you're going to get rid of it and still control space and still tell everybody you can have nuclear power, you can't, I'll give it to you.
Well, that's what we're doing now.
That's what we're doing now. It won't work. It won't work for nuclear disarmament either.
And the problem is, Pogo said, we've met the enemy and the enemy be us.
Isn't that awful?
Is that, you feel that way? Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of vision.
You don't like to think that about
And so
us.
where do we look for the vision? On your papers, they're worth reading. And let them know where you got this paper parked, because that critique you wrote was really well done. I read it very carefully all last night. It's rather long and involved. And let people know where that's parked now.
Okay, well, the energy with the angel, to see how we can, that's the positive power, that's www.abolition2000.org.
Okay.
And the analysis, it's called a roadmap for U.S. presidential candidates for nuclear disarmament.
Okay.
You can get that at www.pdamerica.org. That's Progressive Democrats of America.
Okay.
pdamerica.org. And it's called Roadmap. You just put in my name, Alice Slater, and it'll come up. It's on the blog.
That's where you want to go, because they're saying, what are the progressives? Well, one of the progressives is Alice Slater. And she said, what do you mean, what do you want to put up? I've got it up. Take a look, you schmuck. And don't be telling me where is the answer. No, but on another level, you understand what I'm saying?
No, but I do appreciate that you're having me here to
pleasure.
To put the words down.
And in fact, I want to hear right here and now says you should become a producer here, because communication is the DNA. And here we got a thing where you could come over and start a program. Why don't you think about doing that?
Well,
we're going to try and induce you to come over and become a producer along with others, because you've done an awful lot of research. You're involved with that abolition, and your writing is really sings. It's really good and puts the position forth. And I mean, you ought to be able to start spreading this out in the telecosm, as they say, in terms of communication. I think communication is important.
It is.
And being able to get it, because it's such a crucial time. And I just don't know where, and so that's an invitation to you right here on the air.
Well, thank you.
You want to accept my invitation?
I will accept looking into it.
Oh, you will accept looking into it. That's trust but verify, as Mr. Reagan used to say.
I never think of myself as a television producer, but I really appreciate being on your show.
Television is very important, though, because that's the way the communications is taking place. And here you can get it out. You get it out on the internet and that kind of stuff. And Kevin Saunders done a lot of stuff. He's really a good person. You've worked with Kevin quite a bit.
On the abolition issues.
And you've been on this issue as long as I can remember. Alice Slater has been there on this issue and writing so well on it. I really thank you for all of that. It's a huge subject and everything, and I sure hope things can move in that direction. I just don't think we have a basic ideological. I think the problem is with the progressive community. The main problem is with the progressive community.
You mean putting it in a soundbite you're talking about?
Pardon?
You're talking about putting it in a soundbite.
No, not in a soundbite, but in an ideology, or in a. I don't know what the basis for that is in terms of just economic theory.
I'll give you a good idea.
Yeah, I think Muammar Gaddafi may have something.
When I was in junior high school,
yes, dear,
in 1948, in my autograph book,
we were the same time.
Your favorite movie star and your favorite author, and it said career, I wrote down housework. So I think we should go back to the root word of economics, economos, which means household.
Okay.
And I think we have to think of the planet as our household.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And that's the analogy, and we have to say to the boys, put away your toys,
the boys,
clean up the